So you just entered the hobby, picked out that shiny new box of plastic mecha you've been eyeballing at your favorite local or online retailer, and brought it home ready for ravenous consumption, but have no idea what tools and materials you need to get started? Well, my friends, this is the video for you. So, quick disclaimer. Obviously, this video is aimed at the newcomer to building Gundam plastic models, or even plastic model kits in general. If you're pretty experienced, then this is probably not the video for you, as I'll be going over topics that are super basic. With that quick disclaimer out of the way, let's move forward. They are your models, and you could build and paint them to your personal taste, and that's what makes this hobby fun. In the realm of plastic sprue scale models, Gunpla is a bit of a unique outlier, as they are super beginner friendly, needing only minimal effort and designed to be put together quickly out of the box. I mean that in the sense that they don't require you to fully paint and customize to the extreme to have a nice piece for your collection, but you can certainly take it as far as you'd like in terms of painting and customizing. So the question I get asked a lot is, what tools and materials do I need to start this hobby and get a fairly decent looking finished product out of these kits? Well, not very much. Let's dive right in. Well, if you're just starting out and not really looking to do a fully painted kit, but just want to build it up nice, you don't need too much tools. Compared to full-on traditional scale models, which usually require much more work, painting and gluing everything is not a requirement with Gunpla. Modern Gunpla kits are designed to be snap-fitted and are already molded colored, so only minimal work or painting is needed to get a nice finished model. A lot of kits include stickers, sometimes decals are included to fill in features like the eyes, camera lenses, and even caution markings to further increase details. However, like most plastic models you'll find out there, you'll need to take steps to remove parts from the plastic sprues, also known as runners, as we like to call them, which leads me to our first category of what I'm calling essential tools, hobby nippers. Fritz, can't I just use my mom's nail clippers? I mean, you can, but I think getting some nippers designed for plastic models are oceans better, and to be quite frank, when used properly and maintained, are a worthy investment that should last you forever in this hobby. And they aren't terribly expensive either. I see you there, with your giant backlog of expensive kits. Yeah, you. There goes your nipper money. Give your sister her cuticle cutter back. In all seriousness, there are tons of companies out there that make hobby nippers for different applications and materials, but for the sake of this video, I'll just keep it to nippers rated for plastic and the stuff I use on the regular. So nippers usually boil down to two varieties. What I like to call the regular type cheapo nippers, subjective terms by the way, and the single blade quote unquote premium nippers. Regular nippers are essentially just your basic two-sided jaws that come together and pinch the plastic together at a point to clip them from the sprue. They vary in sharpness and quality, so your mileage may vary depending on the brand and price. I generally use this type for the initial cut, only to release the parts from the sprue, leaving behind some excess. I never cut right up against the part with these. We'll have other methods for that. Old faithful. I used this pair for a long time. A cheap set I bought from Micro Center for 10 bucks. They did their job, but after so many kits, they didn't stay sharp and started crushing more than cutting. I still keep them around for things like cutting zip ties. So recently, I've upgraded to something more robust. Enter the Tamiya sharp-pointed side cutter, slim jaws type. If you've been around scale modeling enthusiasts and hobby shops, you'll see Tamiya everywhere when shopping for tools and hobby-related supplies, because they have a reputation for all-around great quality and are generally reliable products. What I really love about these nippers is the slimmer jaws. So you can really get in there with those tight cuts without getting the chunky part of your nippers getting jammed in the sprue or bigger excess plastic that likes to hang around. And they're pretty great for that first cut, reasonably sharp even for that final excess trim. If I had to own only one pair of nippers, it would be these. Up next, let's talk about single-bladed nippers, also referred to as premium nippers, as they run a little more expensive but also cut a lot cleaner, leaving behind considerably less stress marks on the plastic. For that reason, many modelers use these for trimming the excess plastic for the clean final cut, commonly referred to as the two-cut technique, using a standard nipper first and then finish with a single-bladed nipper. The main draw for using these types of nippers is saving time on the cleanup phase of building models, as it shortens time needed to sand away the gate marks, also known as nub marks, and prevents over-sanding a piece more than needed. I'll have a video for gate mark removal up later and we'll link it here for more in-depth technique. But let's move on. As these leave behind very little surface defects, it's especially useful for people who just want to do straight builds and don't want to fully commit to airbrushing or painting just yet. I would consider these more of a luxury for beginners, as you can still get by with the good old standard nipper. It'll just take a little more effort and some sanding techniques. A short disclaimer on premium nippers. The blades tend to be more thin and as a consequence are at risk of breaking if you try to make big cuts too fast or use them outside their intended use, like cutting metal rods or photo etch. I've also heard of people breaking these when cutting tons of clear parts, so just exercise caution. I haven't had this happen to me yet, so just take your time and stick to cutting model kit plastic. One other word of advice is to lubricate or oil your nippers every so often. In some cases, they can build up a patina of rust and risk breakage after years of use. I just spray a little WD-40 where the nippers have any friction and wipe away excess with some clean paper towel or kitchen roll for our UK cousins. That being said, I've only really used 2 of these premium single-bladed style nippers, so that's all I'll speak on for this video. My number 1 recommendation, if you're looking for the Primo nippers, is the Godhand SPN 120 5.0, the blue handles. As I'm making this video, the general consensus is that these are the undisputed champ of premium nippers. They leave behind so very little stress marks, and even less if you take your time making the cuts and use these solely for trimming excess sprue off your parts. A great tool, but it will cost you, averaging around $60 US. My number 2 recommendation for premium nippers is the Display STA 2.0 single-bladed nipper, as these are the only other ones I've used in this category. They also cut very cleanly, and I use them the exact same way as my Godhands. In my opinion, they're just very slightly less sharp, but are pretty close to the very clean cut you would get with the Godhands. You can even feel when cutting and listening to the sound it makes when you cut that it isn't as buttery smooth, but for nearly $20 less than the Godhands, averaging around $40 US, I can't recommend these enough for the quality, and it's a very close match to the SPN 120. Okay. Now that we've covered how to get your parts off the sprue, how do we go about cleaning them up? Let's talk hobby knives. Having a reliable hobby knife is crucial to doing a lot of the finer detail work in model building. It has a variety of uses, ranging from cutting styrene, decals, stickers, trimming parts off the sprue, you name it. Learning to handle one well and safely and starting projects with a new, fresh blade will save you a bunch of time sanding and doing a lot of the finer detail work later down the road. As a beginner, one of the first things you should practice with your hobby knife is shaving the remaining excess gate marks after trimming with your nippers. No matter how sharp your nippers are, there will inevitably be some excess plastic left that can be shaved off before going into sand. Sure, there are fancy gate mark removal tools like the razor glass file from Gunpla that essentially makes these nub marks a joke, but there are places where that fancy glass file won't fit, so you'll have to get creative. As a useful side note, there is a PDF chart which I will link in the description box below if you're interested in all the sizes and different shapes of blades for the X-Acto knives. When shopping for your craft and hobby knives, I always try to find ones that come with a safety cap so I don't accidentally cut myself putting them away or moving them. I've been that guy that has dropped the blade straight into my bare foot, so use caution. Another great alternative is Tamiya's model knife, which is something I use pretty much on a regular basis nowadays. It's a good old standby and uses Olfa blades, which have less of an angle when compared to X-Acto's pointy number 11 blades, but are useful in their own right. This handle also feels very solid in the hand and has its own range of unique attachments to fit as well. What I like the most is that it comes with a safety cap and a pack of 25 blades in a case so you can also dispose of your used dull blades for convenience. I'm a big fan of tools that come with storage. Speaking of Olfa, Tamiya knife is pretty much an Olfa art knife with the Tamiya logo pasted over it, which goes without saying. Olfa is the next best choice if you can't find Tamiya, as it's pretty much the same thing. They take all the same size blades and related attachments. Use what you prefer. I personally keep a variety, but having just at least one handle and a bunch of spare blades handy is good enough if you're a beginner. Quick note, don't use your hobby knives to open boxes, bags, or cutting packaging tape. You'll burn through your spare blades quickly. Use a dedicated utility knife for that and save your hobby blades for your kits. Get the most out of your hard-earned cash. This hobby can get expensive really fast. Now, continuing on to what I consider a pretty contentious subject in the scale modeling and Gunpla communities, as there are so many schools of thought on how you should go about sanding away those nub marks and surface imperfections. Everyone has different tastes on what they like to use and what works and doesn't work for them, so this may just boil down to personal preference. So for the purpose of this video, I will share what I personally like to use and some products that I've gravitated towards over the years in the hopes that you'll take this information and find it useful when choosing your hobby abrasives to have in your toolkit. That being said, this is what worked for me. And I'll also share some general tips that can hopefully help you when getting rid of those pesky nub marks and surface imperfections. Keep in mind, my methods may be different from what you see other modelers doing or what you may find on your own, but just take from that for what you will. If you don't like my way, do it your way, whatever way you find useful. There are no right or wrong ways, as long as you're trying to get to what you're trying to achieve. But before we go over sanding and what products I like to use, let's go over parts removal techniques one more time. On the first cut with your nippers, always cut away from the part, leaving a bit excess behind. The reason for this is to reduce stress marks that like to appear from plastic being pressed against the surface from the blades applying force when cutting. The idea is to direct pressure from the force being applied away from the part itself. After I've removed parts from the sprue with my regular nippers, I trim that excess plastic I've intentionally left against the part with my single bladed nippers. Try to cut slowly and not go too fast, especially if you really care about any marks left behind. Aim the cutting side of your single bladed nipper towards the sprue mark facing the edge of the part, where the mark is sitting, and align it flush with the surface. The dull offset side of your nipper should act as a stop and guide. Cut slowly and carefully, and you should have a nice, almost flat surface with very little to almost no excess sprue. If you don't have a single bladed nipper, it's not the end of the world. Use your general purpose nippers first, leave a little excess, and carefully shave away with your hobby knife until it's nearly flush and barely any excess sprue mark remain. Anyways, if you did follow the 2-cut process, once the trimming with the nippers is complete, same old story. This is when I'll go in with my hobby knife to gently chisel away any remaining sprue plastic to keep my part surface close to flat as possible. In summary, remove the parts off the sprue with your regular nippers. Then go in and trim the parts with your premium nippers. Then if any excess material or sprue remain, try to gently chisel that away with your hobby knife. If you always follow these steps for removing parts from the sprue, you'll greatly reduce the amount of time needed to sand the parts down and also reduce the visibility of those stress marks, especially if you're doing straight builds. Seems like a lot of fuss for some initial cleanup, but it's worth the effort, trust me. A lot of this hobby for me is practicing patience and try not to rush these initial steps. This is where I spend a lot of my time. I've generally stuck to this method because it's the tried and true way I'm used to. Now that we got our parts removed and trimmed, we can go in with abrasives. For flat surfaces, I like to start sanding with something rigid that won't bend, usually a small diamond grit file, aligning it flush with the surface and with barely any pressure, just file in one direction towards the gate mark and lift and repeat. Try not to go back and forth and in different directions, as you are essentially creating more work for yourself to clean up, and all the scratches in different directions won't help. With rougher grits, you want to be a little more conservative because it doesn't take much. Always stop between each stroke and brush away dust to check for evenness. That's all you want to look for, and then you can move on. Try your best to not overdo this step, as it can be really easy to oversand. Check your work frequently. You'll get a better sense of this the more you do it. You can usually get a set of diamond grit files for a reasonable price. They last forever and have different shapes to access areas where you might find it hard with sandpaper or larger abrasive tools. After filing the surface and making sure it's even, we need to remove the scratches we just made with the file. And that's where sandpaper or sanding sticks come in. You can really use anything you like, as the choices are overwhelming. General rule of thumb is to just try to only go over what you did in the previous sanding step. For this example, I'll be using Tamiya's sandpaper sheets. They come in a variety of grits and assorted packs to suit what you need. I usually just start with around 400 grit, cut it to the size that suits the situation and is ergonomic and comfortable. It's the same process. Just sand in one direction towards the gate mark until the scratches from the file are gone. Then move on to higher grit sandpaper. After 400 grit, I move on to 600, then 800, and I'll usually stop there. Now, if you really wanted, you can keep moving up to higher and higher grits until it's polished plastic. But that depends what your goals are for aesthetics. Generally, when I'm painting the whole kit, 800 to 1000 grit is enough. If you're not painting, or going for glossy aesthetics like shiny metallics or polishing clear parts, you can keep going higher until you're satisfied. This is all personal preference and up to the individual to use their best judgment as for what their aesthetic goals are with their kits. For curved or uneven surfaces, I would suggest avoiding using hard or rigid abrasives, as you can end up flattening areas of a part if you go too heavy on the sanding. So for this, I would recommend either sanding by following the contours of the piece or using an abrasive that conforms to the surface. My personal preference is to use Tamiya's sanding sponges. They also come in a variety of grits and can be cut to the shape you need. They also have a spongy layer between the grits of sand to help you follow the contours of the curved surface, making it easier to handle and avoid that flattening effect. As you can tell, I gravitate towards the Tamiya sandpaper and sponges a lot. These are just some examples. There are dozens of products like this out there that can suit whatever need or preference you have. Generally, it's all the same techniques. Just use what appeals to you and roll with that. That being said, let me go over some other things I've used. God hand sponges are quality products too, and they come in different sizes, grits, and thicknesses. You can also trim to the shape you need. I've used this to varying degrees and generally like the results I got. Infinimodel, which is a Korean-based company, has sanding sticks and sponge sticks that are also amazing products. They too have a variety of grits, but come in sizes that are more akin to large nail boards and making them very ergonomic to hold in the hand, but may not work for those really tight spots. For tight spots, I really like these slim sticks, as they come in a variety of grits also, and I've honestly had this bundle for years. As a cheaper alternative and honorable mention, you can also use nail sanding products found at various big box retailers and beauty supply stores. I've had success using their polishing sticks and multi-step sanding tools meant for polishing nails on my models. Quality on these is hit or miss, and some degrade faster than others. At the end of the day, sometimes there will inevitably be some nub mark left or remaining on the surface, some remnant of it, even after completely polishing out the surface. So try not to get too hung up or frustrated, as there's nothing you can really do about that unless you paint over it. Now, I feel like I've talked about abrasives and sanding in general, but honestly, it's like 80% of this hobby, and the most necessary step if you want a good looking finished product at the end of the day. Your model will only look as good as the prep work you put into it. Whether you decide to paint or just do a straight build, how well you do that initial prep and cleaning will determine how good looking your model will be at the end. I know this is subjective for some folks, but this is where I spend most of my time when building my kits. I like to look back at my kits with some level of admiration of the work I put into it. So for your kits, just do what looks good to you and then elevate the aesthetics as far as you'd like. So take from that what you can. Whew. Moving on. Now on to something which I feel like is kind of overlooked when it comes to building Gunpla or assembling your models, which is having some kind of brush to dust off your models as you're sanding like crazy and building them up. After all that sanding and cleanup work, dust is going to build up in tight spots, panel lines, and crevices of your parts. Sure, you can dust it off by blowing on the piece with your mouth. However, since I usually paint my kits, I don't want the occasional saliva getting on my pieces from blowing on it. I like to keep things clean. Contained. Having a spare toothbrush around to brush off parts as I work is good enough for most situations. You can use any old toothbrush. If you've been to the dentist enough times, you more than likely have a sacrificial brush or two lying in your sock drawer. If not, then the dollar store is your best friend. But to expand on this a bit, I also keep a finer bristle soft makeup brush to really get in the fine spots and keep things clean. I got this from a beauty supply store for dirt cheap, and it works surprisingly well for this purpose. This is especially useful if you're going to be painting and don't want dust getting trapped in your paint layers or top coat. It's also helpful to check your work when switching between those different grits of abrasives. Additionally, I also use this Tamiya anti-static brush, which also keeps things clean and dust-free, ready for my next step of painting or building. It's also great for dusting off my models and figures for display. I don't know if it really gives an anti-static effect. It may not be totally necessary for everyone, but I feel like it's nice to have, and it helps keep things tidy in my collection. It's also double-sided, equipped with a more precision tip on the other end for tight spots. On another side note, I also whip out this flat, huge paintbrush from time to time, just for sweeping up my build area when things get crazy. Maybe it's just my OCD and need to always keep things tidy.
Shake them up.
But I feel like it makes my building experience better. Speaking of making experiences better, do you ever find yourself struggling with those tinier parts and stickers only to fumble and lose them to the carpet monster? Well, that's where having a pair of decent modeling tweezers come in. The ones I have here, I purchased from my local hobby shop, but you can use what is available to you. Try to find ones with a nice point and geared towards scale modeling hobbies, small electronics, and jewelry work. These will all work wonders and keep you from riding the Butterfinger struggle train. The ones from your mom's manicure kit just won't cut it, as these tend to have flat ends, which might be useful for stickers or decals, but won't give you precision for some of that finer work. Spend the extra dough and get yourself a reliable pair of fine pointed tweezers. I personally like having a straight and curved pair of tweezers on hand. They're both useful in their own right, but I find myself always gravitating towards the curved pair as they're easier for me to handle ergonomically. They're especially useful for applying water slide decals, handling masking tape, stickers, and very tiny parts that are tough to handle with just your bare fingers, especially if you have sausage fingers like me and drop everything. These shouldn't set you back too much, and you can often find them bundled together in a set anywhere from $10 to $30 US. The ones I use are Hobbytown USA branded, but other popular model kit tool brands make their own tweezers as well. Find what appeals to you and roll with that. Now that we've covered pretty much all the essential hand tools, you may have noticed I left out a couple of obvious things, and that is because they're related to where you'll be actually doing your building. I also understand that everyone's situation is different, and not everybody has that luxury of having a dedicated hobby space. Maybe you have a shared space, so you maybe have to clean up between each session, or maybe you like to build at your computer desk. Whatever the case is, I hope that this information suits your needs and space accommodations. So let's start with the actual work surface, the good old cutting mat. So why get a cutting mat? Well, it pretty much boils down to the name, which is having a surface to safely cut on. Think of it as a cutting board for your crafts and hobbies. It will protect your desk or whatever work area you are using from getting scuffed up. It's also a great organizational tool and precision to have for measuring or guiding your cuts. It also makes you officially a cool professional looking hobby person, at least to me. A visual rite of passage, if you will. In all seriousness, it's incredibly useful. For example, I frequently use my mats for helping me cut masking tape for precise jobs. It's also a good surface to cut out water slide decals, styrene, and tasks that will require tons of blade work. They're also just great to have if you do a lot of DIY stuff in general around your house, a worthy investment. Cutting mats on the market have a variety of printed markings and guides on them, and depending on what they are marketed for example, scale models, Gunpla, sewing will have different units of measurement, so metric or imperial, millimeters or inches. They also come in a standard range of sizes as well. Different colors to match your aesthetics if you're picky about that sort of thing. And also looking for one is very overwhelming as the market seems to be saturated if you're browsing online. Many craft and hobby brands produce them, so just stick to what you like and what fits your needs and working area. This will be your personal choice. One feature I recommend you should look for is that they are labeled as self-healing. This means they are usually made of layers of PVC that compress back together after being cut. The advantage is that this keeps the mat surface in one solid piece, absorbing your cuts instead of splitting apart like pieces of paper, giving you a generally consistent area to work on. They're not indestructible though, so after beating up a cutting mat too much over an extended period of time, you may need to replace it. But this is not something you'll have to do that often. Think of it as a long-term consumable, kind of like your first car. Another important thing to note is there are actually standard sizes of mats, ranging from A0 to A4, which are generally as follows. A0, 36 by 48 inches. A1, 36 by 24 inches. A2, 24 by 18 inches. A3, 18 by 12 inches. And A4, 12 by 9 inches. I personally have only used two sizes in all my years of hobbying, which are A2 and A3. My current larger A2 cutting mat at the time of making this video is double-sided and from a generic brand that I cannot find anywhere online, so I'll leave a link to a good equivalent. It works as intended, is self-healing, and notably has some wear. However, it still has a lot of life left in it for future usage, so I'll keep rolling with it for now. I know some people in this hobby who never throw away their mats, using it only for the dirtiest jobs. Completely disintegrated. No markings left. But hey, to each their own. So at the end of the day, get the cutting mat that suits what you need. Now, let's talk about another work area related tool, which people often overlook, and that is lighting. I can't stress how much having good lighting is when doing this hobby. If you can't see what you're doing, how do you know what you're doing is good or not? This is common sense for me, but I still want to go over it for those starting out. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm all about saving money in this hobby, but this is one thing I don't think you should cheat yourself on. Not only does it make things easy for you to see, but it'll keep your eyes from feeling fatigue or strained from long periods of time. That goes without saying. You probably want to be able to see what you're doing properly. You may miss a mold line, or worse, a nub mark, because you decided to use your computer monitor as your work light. Now, mind you, this doesn't mean if you're just starting out that you should break the bank with some over-the-top expensive architectural or surgical LED lamp. For beginner purposes, I'd recommend you just have a bright LED daylight lamp at your desk. Whether it clamps on or just sits at your desk plugged in, it's entirely up to you. Now that being said, they can vary in brightness and features, but the key takeaway is to try to get something that is close to simulating daylight or neutral temperatures, meaning the natural light during the day, because this will give you an accurate and unveiled look at your models when building, checking sanding, or painting work. If you want something closer to natural light, a color temperature of 5500 Kelvin is right where you want to be at. Try to be wary of the temperature output when choosing your lamps and or light bulbs. I personally try to go with a cool white temperature tone. The light bulbs I have in my lamps at my workbench are sitting at 5000 Kelvin respectively. What I'm using right now is two simple clamp-on desk lamps from IKEA on each side of my desk that point towards the center of my work area. I find that for most building, this is good enough for me, and if I need to move them around to see better, I can do that on the fly with some quick repositioning. As a side note, I do diffuse my lamps a bit with these semi-transparent covers I got off AliExpress, namely because the reflections the glass bulbs give off are a bit too harsh sometimes, so these correct that issue. It also helps photos come out a little more clear. I will link these lamps and lamp covers in the description below if you want to copy my setup. However, for those who want something else, I'll also put some alternatives for every budget that other hobby enthusiasts have recommended me. As an alternative, you can always build somewhere outside in broad daylight, like at a park picnic table, if that's an option. Not everyone's cup of tea, but it's an option. So that pretty much concludes all the tools and materials I feel are essential for just getting into this hobby, maybe just getting your feet wet, maybe build some decent Gunpla without having to fully dedicate a large time investment. Maybe this is something you've been thinking of and wanted to try. Hopefully this starts you on your own hobby journey. My hope is that with this video, you can make informed decisions about choosing the tools and materials you need to start diving down that Gunpla rabbit hole. If these topics interest you and you'd like to see more content in this style going forward, please give the channel a like and subscribe, and hit the notification bell for future updates. Stay safe, be nice to each other, build stuff, paint stuff.